Welcome to the MHP Exchange, where the riches are in the niches. We'll show you how to invest your way into mobile home parks with real strategies, tips, and behind-the-scenes know-how to grow your cash flow. Stick around. This is where smart investing begins.
Let me paint a picture for you. You're in your mid-30s, you're working a stable job, and you're putting in your time. You're doing everything right. And then you wake up one day and you realize that that's not going to give me the freedom that I'm looking for. My guest today hit that exact wall. Jonathan Hayek went from lesson plans to lease agreements, from duplex and flipping to owning small box warehouses leased to recession-proof tenants. He now runs a lean, cash-flowing industrial portfolio across the United States, and he does it without giving up his life or his lifestyle in the Colorado mountains. And today's episode of the MHP Exchange, we're going to talk about strategic pivots, asset selection, and how to intentionally build your life around doing the right deals. Jonathan, welcome to the program.
Frank, that was some excellent copy on that intro. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today. And I have to thank my team for, a lot of the homework they do and putting all this together. But I'm really glad to have you on because, for those, I've gotten to know you a little bit, but for the people out there listening who are not familiar with Jonathan Hayek, why don't we give everybody like the brief history that got you to this point?
Sure. So I started my working career as a special education teacher, graduated at 21 years old. And my dad was a teacher. He worked almost 35 years in public schools. I thought that was going to be my path as well. I was a special education teacher for about 8 years. And at some point, I was talking with my wife and we were having a conversation about kind of where we wanted our life direction to go. And I said, you know what, we're just not going to have very much money. My wife at the time was working for a non-for-profit for pennies. And I was a teacher making $56,000 a year. And as a teacher, you can forecast exactly how much money you're going to make because there's a salary schedule. So, each year you get like a 1.5% or 2% raise, and you can forecast that out over the next 20 or 30 years, and you can see how much money you're going to make. And so there's, no matter how hard you work, no matter, how well you do, you're not going to make any more money for the most part. And so I just said, we're just not going to have very much money. And, I think I slept on that when I woke up the next day or a couple days later and was like, you know what? I am, as you said, in my mid 30s. I was like 33 or 34 at the time. And I said, that's not good enough. I'm young enough and I'm not going to be satisfied with that. And so, as I was teaching, I started flipping houses on nights and weekends and school holidays. And I used the proceeds of those house flips to buy small multifamily apartment buildings, duplexes, fourplexes.
Before we get into this, and here's the thing, which I think is really interesting. You're in your 30s, and that's still young, right? That's still a young. But was that your first movement into like entrepreneurial journey? Because we speak to a lot of people, and a lot of times, they were entrepreneurial from the beginning, right? And at that point, they were taking those risks along the way. But you're 30, in your mid 30s, you have a job, you have ideally a pension, you have insurance, you have a wife, you have commitments. Is this the first flip into like the entrepreneurial world at that point?
Yes. I grew up, my parents, I love my parents, but they taught me to value safety and security and to fear failure and to just cling to security. And so that's really the mindset that I was taught growing up. And so at 21 years old, I was getting a teaching job and, my dad said, my dad was retired at the time. He's like, look at my life. He had a pension for the rest of his life and insurance for the rest of his life. He's like, this is the secure life. And so that's what I did for a period of time. And, growing up, I always had like this inkling of what would it be like to do my own thing, be my own boss. But then I was like, I can't do it. That like entrepreneurs, they're born with it. They have something special about them. It's innate. And I just don't have it. Nobody in my family is a small business owner. As I sit here and think about it, I cannot think of a single person in my extended family who is a small business owner. Everyone has a W-2 job. So that is deeply ingrained in me. But my wife and I, we just value freedom. We value time freedom, geographical freedom, and travel freedom, just doing things on our own. And we enjoy nice things, nice travel. And it just kind of hit me like, I'm at least going to try. And so I was, at the time, I may have been, I was probably listening to Bigger Pockets podcasts and listening to other people do these things. And then I started to realize that, these people flipping houses and buying duplexes, there's nothing special about them. They don't have an innate gift. They don't have special skills. They're not born with anything unique. They learn, they read books, they listen to podcasts, they try stuff, they talk to people, they get mentors. And that's how you make it in real estate. You're not born with it. You can develop yourself into a real estate investor.
That's a great point. And it's in taking that action steps that you said. You learn, you get the information you need, and then you take your action. And then I know you said you started with flipping houses, which is the way a lot of real estate investors start. And I think there's a lot to take from that. But what did you learn from flipping houses, or what drew you into that, at first, like their first taste of, real estate entrepreneurship?
I liked that I could do it on my own. Prior to that, like in my 20s, I drove for Uber a little bit, and so that was kind of quasi entrepreneurship. But you realize, that you're actually still working for somebody else in that scenario, and so the amount of cash that you can generate by flipping houses was attractive to me, and the fact that I really was doing it on my own. I would do a lot of the work myself. I could take as much time as I wanted. I could do it on nights and weekends and school breaks. My first flip I did as a summer project from when I was teaching, and so that was my summer break, was flipping this house. And so I think,
did you make money on that, or did you lose money?
Yeah, I made money. Made about 40 grand on that first house flip.
Wow. Now, have you? I mean, but it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows, right? When you were flipping houses, was there challenges along the way? Do you have some deals that didn't work out the way you expected?
I've always been, like everyone says, pretty conservative. I try to buy deals really, really low. There was one deal that I ended up losing. I think I lost about 5 grand on it. And the brief story of that one was I bought it for like $105,000. It was like a 3-bed, 2-bath house, like right down the fairway. I had done a bunch of those deals at that time. But we had a really rainy spring, and I went down into the basement one day, and there's water in the basement. And so I was like, oh man. So I went and got a sump pump and put the sump pump down and got rid of the water out the back door, and then the water would just rise up again. And so I just keep this sump pump going, and got rid of the water, would come back the next day, water again in the basement. And so I ended up putting in and I hired a plumber, put in an official sump pump, and it helped, but didn't totally alleviate the problem. And so I ended up just selling that property. I disclosed everything. Eventually the water receded, but I didn't want to mess with it anymore. So I ended up selling that house to another investor. I think I lost about 5K on it. But I've done about 35 real estate deals, and that is the only property that I've lost money on.
Well, that's a pretty good track record, especially when you're flipping houses. But at some point you made a shift, right? You decide, if I'm not scaling this, or I mean, you're making money, you still have your job, right? So, let's go back a little bit. You're still a teacher, you're flipping on the side, summer project. Where is that switch made where you're saying, all right, I'm going to let go of everything I have right here, and I'm going to just dedicate full time to real estate?
After about 2 years of being in real estate, I was able to reproduce my teaching income, which is not that long, which means I was not making very much money as a teacher. So I was making, I think at my peak, I was making $56,000 a year as a teacher. And so it was 2019 where I had some duplexes and fourplexes, and I had duplicated my teaching salary. And so it was at that point that my wife and I had to, not had to, but we made a decision where we just said, you know what, if I went all in on real estate, what else could we accomplish versus being half in real estate, half in teaching? And so it was June 2019 was when I stopped teaching right before COVID, thankfully, and haven't looked back since. And so it was 2019 that I went full time into real estate and left teaching behind.
Wow. And is it at that time, because you went from flipping houses to industrial, right? And that was really pre it becoming really, one of the hottest areas to invest in. Am I off on that?
I originally thought I was going to build this empire of small multifamily properties, of duplexes and fourplexes. And so when I quit teaching, I was still full on small multifamily. I ended up, I think at my height, I had like 20 or 22 doors. And the management was really starting to get to me. And I think it gets to everyone. And the obvious answer is, well, you can just third party manage. But I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to give up as much money as I would to a management company and have them do a terrible job managing my properties. And so I continued to self-manage, but I started to venture out into other asset classes. And so I would see these commercial properties. I didn't know anything about them, but I just got curious. I was like, man, what would it be like to own an office building or a retail strip? Or how do you learn that? How do you do this commercial stuff? And so there was my first commercial deal was I bought a vacant office building. So it was small. It was about 5,000 square feet, but it was divided up into individual offices. And so I thought it was kind of a natural transition from multifamily, because I was like, okay, if I could buy a vacant fourplex, I would fix up the units and then rent them out. So why can't I do the same thing with an office building? And so that's what I did. And so I bought it totally vacant and did some painting and like made them like trendy, did some like barnwood shiplap in some of the offices, and did little things to make it a desirable place to live, and ended up leasing up 10 individual offices and then another larger office suite, and then sold it about 18 months later as a fully occupied office investment for another investor. And so that experience just taught me a million lessons about commercial real estate. One of those lessons was that I do not want to own office buildings. It was a great experience, but I don't want to own office buildings. So then I just started thinking about, well, okay, what do I not like about office? What other asset classes could not have that downside? And so then I started venturing into single tenant industrial properties. And so these are small warehouses occupied by one tenant. These are not huge flex parks. These are single tenant buildings. And so bought my first one in Oklahoma City and continued from there. These are properties with great tenants on net leases, very low management, and also some upside. And so that is really where my focus is today.
You know what I have taken out of hearing about your story so far is not only that you're taking action, but the questions that you ask yourself along the way that force you to really do a deep dive in it. Like the first question being, what more could I do if I just solely focused on real estate? And then asking yourself again, once you decided to go into, let me take a venture into buying a vacant, office building, because why not, right? Which I love, right? I'll just try it. Let's see what happens. I know I'll make it work. But then kind of doing that after action report on yourself and dissecting, what did I like? What did I not like? What do I want to replicate? What do I want to keep? And what do I want to kill? And that's something that I think investors, regardless of where you invest. I mean, I think that's such a key thing to do. I mean, that's something that you always did, or is that something that you just picked up along the way and helped you in your investment, in your investment life cycle?
I try to have some self-awareness. And so if I'm spending time on stuff that I hate, I try to pay attention to that. And so there are some parts of real estate, some parts of business that you just have to do that you can't get around, whether it's paperwork and, you can only hire so much stuff out. And there are other parts that you might really love, whether it's finding deals or capital raising or working on your projects. And so I just tried to really pay attention to my energy and like what I was feeling about how am I spending my time? Do I like how I'm spending my time? Would I rather be doing something different? Are there things that I like about what I'm doing and other things that I don't like? And paying attention to that and leaning into what I was enjoying and what was bringing me life and bringing me energy. When in the multifamily world, the small multifamily world, when I was getting bogged down by management, I could almost see like into the future. Like I guess I would call it intuition. I could see the path of where I was going. The deals were getting worse. So I was thinking, okay, I'm going to be doing more of this for less money and potentially less upside. I don't like where this is headed. And so, I was just kind of running through the different scenarios. I could hire some team members. And so, there's merits to that and downsides to that. And I just decided that I did not want to build a big team. I did not want to have a team of contractors and people that I was responsible for paying hourly. And pivoting into single tenant industrial allowed me to continue to maintain ownership and power all myself while also continuing to expand my portfolio.
So operationally, it ticks for you. Can you unpack, because industrial is one area that I'm not very familiar with. Like I've been involved as a broker, some industrial transactions, but I've never owned industrials. Right. So full disclosure, it's always been, more into multifamily. We do affordable housing, through the manufactured housing space, which we love. And for me, I understand the thesis, like people need a place to live. We have an affordable housing crisis. And that to me makes sense. And I can understand that. How do you unpack the mechanics of an industrial deal and why it works so well for you? Like what's some of the metrics that you look at to define what's a good opportunity for you or not?
You could almost replace your thesis with, the thesis of people need a place to live with people need a place to run a business. So the cool thing with, that one of the many things that I like about industrial is that this specific type of asset, they're not building any more of it. These are typically small, like under 20,000 square feet. Most of my stuff is even under 10,000 square feet. And in general, business owners want to have their own building. And so they could get space in one of these big flex parks. Oftentimes for a lot of tenants, that's kind of an intro, like you're just starting your business. And so you get space in one of those flex parks. The vast majority, you talk to almost any business owner, they're going to want their own space. So the types of tenants I'm talking about are plumbers, electricians, contractors, granite fabricators, window installers, commercial landscaping companies, environmental response companies. All these types of tenants, they need a place to do business. They need a place to store their trucks. They need a place for their people to answer phones, for their supervisors to have an office. They need a place to store supplies. Whether that be inside or outside, they need a space to do this stuff. And these are tenants that are Amazon proof. I don't see Amazon getting into the emergency environmental cleanup business anytime soon. We're going to need these people and they're going to need a place to do business. And so they need a place to run their business out of. And For the most part, these are not efficient buildings to build. If you've got a piece of industrial land, talk to a lot of industrial developers, they're not building single tenant unless it's build to suit. They are building flex. And flex is like, I'm talking about multi-tenant flex parks where you've got like a 2,500 square foot unit and, somebody with their small business comes in and you've got 20 of those lined up. If any industrial is being built, that's what's being built. But what I'm focused on is single tenant, standalone, oftentimes with a yard, with a fence, with a couple roll up doors, very small office. And these tenants love their space. They run their business out of it. They have employees that rely on it. And a lot of them will never leave.
So that's great. And because you're single tenant, right? The tenant selection process has to be critical. I mean, it's critical to your success. Is there something specific you look for? Is it in the tenant, or is it more market driven where you're looking more location and you just know that the business that'll come there will be able to sustain? So like what's more, how's that process work for you?
At this point, I do not buy vacant properties. That is kind of a whole different business and a whole different risk level. So right now, I'm only buying occupied properties with a tenant already in place. So what I look for when I'm kind of underwriting a deal and looking at a deal is a tenant that's been there long term. So every single one of the properties I own, the tenant has been there for 20 years at a minimum. So these are well-established tenants that have been there. They've got roots, they've got history. Their employees are used to going to this location. I'm looking for tenants with employees that work there, not single operators. And they're clearly doing a lot of business in the local area. And so they've been there a long time, and they're going to continue to do business for a long time. They have no intention of leaving. The value add comes with an expiring lease or close to an expiring lease, and the tenant wants to stay, and they have below market rent. And so when I purchase on a cap rate, it's based on the current NOI, similar to self-storage or a mobile home park. You've got below market rates and the tenants want to stay. And so you can bump them up either all at once or over time and increase their rent, which increases your NOI, which increases your overall value of the property. These tenants generally sign 3 to 5 to 7 to 10 year, sometimes 15 or 20 year leases. And so that is predictable cash flow for a long period of time. And there's almost always annual rent bumps baked into the lease. So typical is 2 to 3% annually. And so that's really where the value add, and that's where the opportunity is. And then on top of that, these are generally net leases. Mm. So that means that the tenant is responsible for paying taxes and insurance and maintenance. And in some cases, they pay, if the roof is bad, they pay to replace the roof, the parking lot, the HVAC. So from my standpoint as a landlord, I can own these all across the country. I don't need a third-party manager because there's almost nothing to do except collect rent.
It's so funny you say that, because of all the guests I've had on, you seem to be the most relaxed, right? And I know you've talked about freedom and freedom of time and freedom of travel. Like, how have you been able to build your investment life around that? Like, and what tips would you give to somebody? Because one of the biggest challenges that anybody, it's one of the biggest challenges that I have is getting out of the grinder operator mentality and looking more as, the architect visionary, right? So how were you able to do that and put yourself in the position where now, hey, I'm hands off. I have my systems in place. It seems like you run a very lean, operation, but you're able to live the life that you desire.
There are some people in real estate that want to build the biggest business possible, and that's great. They're people that they like to brag about how many employees they have, how many VAs they have, and all their systems and all their processes, and that is great. If you want to build the biggest business you can, go right ahead. That's great. That was never my intention. My intention was lifestyle based. I wanted to, I want to spend time with my family. I want to raise my kids. I want to ski. I want to run in the mountains. I want to travel when I want. And I want to build the business that is the right size for me. In my transition from multifamily to industrial, also happening at this time was I was moving from I was living in Cheyenne, Wyoming, very very active in my real estate portfolio, to a mountain town in Colorado. I do not invest where I live. The numbers don't make sense. The numbers are just ridiculous here, and so I don't own any real estate where I live. And so I knew I was going to be investing from a distance, and owning and operating multifamily from a distance, very, very challenging. And you're probably setting yourself up for some big disappointments if you're trying to own and operate multifamily from a distance. But industrial, so far from my experience, totally possible to do from a distance. And so it goes back to the self-awareness of like, what do I want out of life? And so if you're not asking yourself that, you probably should be. And so some people really do want to be building the biggest business, and they want to talk about how many doors they have and how many pads they have or how many square feet they have. That's not me. What I want to do is generate the income that's going to support my lifestyle in a sustainable way. And I have no desire to brag about my square footage or my employees or anything like that. It's like, if I were to think like, okay, if my life were different, if I had if my net worth were 10x what it is, and if I had 50 employees, but I had no freedom, if I was chained to my computer and my desk every day, would that be a win? No, that would be terrible for me. I would hate that. And so when I see myself starting to go down that road or focus on things that are unsustainable or things that I don't want, I back up and I say, wait a second, that's not what I want. Let's focus on my life and build my business around my life so that I can live the life that I want.
And that's being focused on your true North Star, and cutting out all the noise on the side, which is, I think, a lot of people struggle with that. And you seem to be really attuned to what's most important, what's going to move the needle for you the most. And it doesn't sound like it doesn't always have to be monetarily. It's what is going to move the needle the most in the direction that I'm supposed to be going in. And I think that's good advice for anybody who's looking to invest or to operate or building their business or building their entrepreneurship journey. So that's fantastic. I want to talk a bit, because you're the host of a podcast called The Source of Commercial Real Estate. It's very polished. It's very intentional. How do you think that's impacted your business?
My podcast has been all about, it's 2.5 years old now, almost 3 years old now. And it's been all about learning for me. And so when I told you before that I had these questions about like, how do I invest in retail? How do I invest in self-storage or industrial? I couldn't find answers anywhere. At the time, there were very few books on the topic, and podcasts. I still don't know if there are any other podcasts doing exactly what I'm doing. And so I was really like, okay, there are people out there are investors out there that I want to learn from. And, I could ask them to, pick their brain or have a phone call or something like that. But I wanted it to be a little more value based. And so I decided to start a podcast because I wanted to learn from the people that were doing the thing that I wanted to learn about. And so I started it, and my guests are investors of mobile home parks, but also retail centers, industrial, self-storage. And these are people that have been doing it a while. and I'm able to ask the questions that I want to ask and share it with other people that also want to learn. And so it's been I can't say that I've gotten deals from it or I raised tons of capital from it, but it does, having a podcast does bring some legitimacy to me as an investor. So I can share it with brokers and lenders, and they see that like, oh wow, 200 episodes of your podcast. Okay, that's not nothing. And so it brings some legitimacy and to what I'm doing, and then I also just learn a ton. I learn about the asset classes that I want to invest in, and it also expands my network. I'm naturally a pretty big introvert, so I'm happy to just kind of stay in my office and do my own thing, but it gets me out of my comfort zone and helps me build my network with people that I would otherwise not be able to meet.
Yeah, that's a great point. And for me, you hit the nail on the head. I mean, you speak to other people in the space, whether they're operators, they're in a different asset class, they might be and you just, there's so much information that you can pick up and share back and forth and just find out what's really working. And then when you really sit down with someone like yourself and you figure out like certain elements of success that just translate over, like that self-awareness, that focus and cutting out the noise, whether you're invested in industrial or you're in multifamily or you're in mobile home parks or you're in another business altogether, that's so critical. And that's something that just translates to anybody. And that's where I think it helps me just kind of refocus. These are the things I need to be doing because other people who are successful, they're doing the same things. And I think that's a great point. I want to kind of shift the focus and just, ask you some questions just to get your insight. I mean, what do you think the trend in commercial real estate? Do you think small industrial is still going to be the because that's been a very hot area, a lot of capital's poured into it. Do you think that still has legs, or do you think there's another area of the commercial real estate market that people should pay attention to as well?
Gosh, I mean, I love the industrial world because these are jobs that are just not going anywhere. Like some of my tenants are a glass manufacturer, a commercial landscaping company, a I have another tenant who they build and maintain cell phone towers, and so it's like these are, and there's all kinds of other tenants that occupy this space, the plumbers and electricians and that kind of stuff. And so it's really hard for me to see a world where these people do not need a space. I mean, maybe it may happen, but probably not in my investing lifetime. And so I think, focusing on good quality real estate that's below replacement cost, below the vacant value, well located, desirable towns. And that could be different asset classes. You could find retail that fits those parameters, or um,
And you know what the interesting thing about what you're saying about the businesses you're talking about? Those are jobs that AI won't be able to take over, right? Like there's certain things that, I mean, maybe down the road there'll be something else, but for right now, where everybody's talking about AI taking jobs and shifting things in the workplace, the jobs you're talking about that AI can't do. I mean, an HVAC contractor, AI is not taking that job, right? An industrial cleaner, AI is not taking that job, right? Those people still need a place to go. And so there's still a necessity for that business to be housed somewhere. So there is that moat around that business, at least for the time being, that gives it some protection and some legs, right? From what I'm getting from you.
I think so. I mean, I am not a fortune teller, and so I can't predict in 10 years which asset class is going to be the hottest, but I am just focused on cash flowing real estate that if my tenant leaves, I can backfill with another tenant. There's going to be demand in the marketplace, and look, I mean, in real estate, we take on some risk. There's going to be unexpected things that happen down the line, but you try to focus on fundamentals, buy quality real estate, and make good decisions.
So what's your plan or goal between now and the end of the year? I mean, are you still in buy mode? I know you said you look in all 39 states. Are you still actively buying? Like, what's your goal now?
My big project right now is I'm under contract for a portfolio of 6 properties in the Midwest. Earlier this year, I closed the biggest deal of my career, and now I'm looking to close another biggest deal of my career. And so that's been my focus. And if I can close that deal by the end of the year, that'll be a big win. So that's a great cash flowing deal with a regional tenant, with quality real estate that I like. I was visiting it last week, and so definitely still in buy mode. I think now is a great time to buy if you can find great real estate at a great price and get some long-term debt on it. Interest rates and debt is something that I am not going to try to predict. And so I closed a deal earlier this year and I got a 7-year term on it. I could have gotten a shorter term with slightly lower interest rate, but I took the higher interest rate for a longer term security with a 7-year note. And so that's what I'm focused on, trying to get the longest debt I can, lock in my interest rate so I don't have to worry about it. And that's really my focus. Definitely still in buy mode. I think now is a great time to buy real estate.
So if somebody's out there right now listening to this and they're in their early 30s and they're stuck in a job, which we know, and I like to tell people a job is, we know what a job stands for, right? Just over broke. You're stuck in a job that they're not happy with, and they're looking to really break free and pivot to live the life they desire. What would be the advice that Jonathan Hayek would give them today? What do they need to do to move forward the way you did?
Be real with yourself and understand if you are willing to be the operator or if someone else needs to be the operator and you need to place capital with someone else. Real estate is no joke. You buy a bad deal, you can get hosed and you can lose a bunch of money. And so if you hear this, or you're watching Instagram reels or watching YouTube videos and you're like, I kind of want to flip a house, or you see it on HGTV and you're like, I think I'm going to go flip a house, and you buy some ugly house off the MLS and you pay too much for it, and you have no idea what you're doing with the rehab, and you have no idea what it's going to sell for on the back end, you're going to lose money. It's very easy to lose money in real estate. And so be very real with yourself, and understand if you are willing to do the work and learn the lessons that you need to. Start with small deals. If you decide that, yes, I want to be an operator, start with a small deal. Use your own money, because you will treat a deal differently when it's your own money and when it's your name that's signed on the loan documents. And so if you can do a small deal and you can learn a bunch of valuable lessons, and then you can scale up from there and do slightly bigger deals and do more deals. And then you have a track record and you can show investors, hey, I've done this several times, and these are the returns I've gotten. Do you want to invest with me? Then that's kind of the appropriate way to scale in my mind. But I don't know, man, if I think it's really dangerous for people to be looking on social media and see these people doing fund to funds and raising money and flipping houses and doing multifamily and taking all kinds of fees with no experience or very little experience. And I think it's a very, very dangerous way to operate in real estate. And so I'd say just be very real with yourself and be very careful.
I think that's great advice. I think what I've taken from talking with you is, make sure you know what you want, right? That you're very clear on those goals. This way you know which direction you need to be in, and you're constantly reviewing, okay, what did I do well? What do I need to change? Where do I want to be? And block out that noise, right? To move forward, to block out that noise. And Jonathan, your story has been inspirational. I mean, because it's in and I'm going to say a relatively short period of time, you went from working for somebody else, knowing what your future was going to be like, to defining what your future is going to be, which is huge. And obviously killing it, buying properties all over the country. And I really appreciate you being on this program. And for those of you listening, if you want to hear more of Jonathan, Where can they get in touch with you? Where can they reach you? And where should they download your podcast?
You can go to my website. I have a personal website, jonathanhayek.co, and all the links to connect with me are there. My podcast is called The Source of Commercial Real Estate, and you can listen to that wherever you listen to podcasts.
Beautiful. Jonathan, thank you so much for being a guest on this program. Maybe one of these days we'll get you to think about mobile home park investing. We'll have another conversation about that. But until next time, everyone, this has been Frank Rizzo with the MHP Exchange podcast. If you found value from this episode, like it, share it on Spotify or iTunes. That's how we reach more people. And then until next time, happy investing.